Hi, I've made this short video just to recap some of the practices that we are learning as part of the Buteyko breathing technique and building on the practices that we've been learning on the Yoga for Health 10-week program. So when you are doing a breathing practice, and remember you can integrate some of these practices into your everyday life, but let's say you're going to sit down and do 5 or 10 minutes of breathing, and ideally you would do that every day or as often as you can fit into your life, and longer if you want to. And often the breathing practices are a very good lead-in practice for doing a little bit of mindfulness or meditation. So you might want to finish your session with a little bit of silent meditation, either just focusing on the breath or watching the thoughts, witnessing the thoughts of the mind. So each time you sit to do some breathing, just take a moment to really become embodied. So by that, I mean just closing the eyes, being aware of all the sensations in the body, making sure you're sitting with the spine upright, allowing yourself to really acknowledge how you're feeling right here, right now. And when the body feels settled and comfortable, then you focus in on the breath and take a moment to simply observe how your breath is right here, right now. And what we do in the first practice is simply do a little bit of breath awareness, but to overlay the principles of Buteyko, which is to cultivate a breath that is low, being down in the diaphragm, not up in the chest, a breath that is slow, and a breath that is very subtle and light. And we mix into that this concept of breath hunger. So we want to feel as if we are just breathing enough to meet our needs, that we're not feeling any anxiety, that we might not be getting enough breath, that we're not going to receive enough oxygen to nourish our body, but at the same time trying to counteract the very common habit of overbreathing, of breathing in excess of metabolic needs. So again, with the eyes closed or downcast and keeping that breath low and slow and light, notice how subtle you can make the in-breath, and notice the sensations in the nostrils as the cool air enters the body. And allow that air to be drawn down to the base of the lungs by keeping the tummy soft. Let the diaphragm do its work, not the intercostal, the rib cage muscles. So the movements of the ribs are very slight in this relaxed breath. You will feel some movement of the lower ribs because the diaphragm tucks in under those lower ribs. A good sign is when the belly is moving out slightly as you breathe in, and moving back towards the spine slightly as you breathe out. Feel as if you are sipping the breath in through your nose, as if you were taking in the fragrance of a beautiful flower. Allow your breath to have the quality of softness and smoothness and flow. And to nourish this principle of lightness and slowness in the breath, encourage yourself to really notice the end of the inhale, the beginning of the exhale, the end of the exhale, and there might even be a little pause there before the next inhale naturally arises. You can do this breath awareness practice for as long as you like, and you could make that your whole practice if you wanted to. So you could pause the video and carry on with that, or we're going to move on now to the other techniques we covered in the breathing class. So the next one we're going to do is just play a little bit with the cadence, the rhythm of the breath. So again, closing the eyes or have the eyes downcast. Returning to that low, slow, subtle breath. And now we're trying to move into a rhythm of breathing for 5 breaths a minute or 6 breaths a minute. And if you're moving at 5 breaths a minute, then that means that the inhale and the exhale takes 12 seconds altogether. And then 5 of those breaths makes 60 seconds, makes the minute. And if you're breathing just a little more quickly, and do that if you feel any strain in trying to do 5 breaths a minute, and indeed you could do 6 or 7 breaths a minute, you must always find a rhythm, a cadence to your breath that is not creating any tension or anxiety or panic in the body or the mind. It must always be relaxed. You can always develop your breath over a period of practice, so you don't need to leap in and do the full practice straight away. So if we're doing 6 breaths a minute, we're just breathing in and breathing out, and it's going to take 10 seconds to do that. And then just decide which of the 2 practices you prefer. So you can either do equal breathing, where you're breathing in for 5 or 6 seconds and breathing out for 5 or 6 seconds. Or you might want to do the slightly longer exhale if you find that helpful. So we might be breathing in for 4 or 5 seconds and breathing out for 6 or 7 seconds. Remember, we're keeping a lot of space around the breath, so a turning point at the end of the inhale, a slight pause at the end of the exhale, that is included within the time that we are inviting the breath to take. And some of you may be well capable of slowing the breath down even further, but we know from the research papers that breathing at 5 or 6 breaths per minute is a really helpful rhythm to promote heart rate variability, and at the same time parasympathetic response, relaxation response. So whichever practice you're doing, it should bring about feelings of feeling more relaxed, might even feel a little bit sleepy. You may notice there's a little more saliva in the mouth. Maybe you feel warmth in the body. These are all good signs that things are as they should be. So continue with this practice for as long as you like. And you might want to pause the video and do that. We're just going to cover a couple of other aspects. So one fun way to work with this breathing practice is to get a little feather. You might find one out in the wild, or you might just have one lying around. And to help you develop that subtlety of breath would be to just hold the feather up. I don't have one here in my hand now. It's not an invisible feather. And to get into this practice by just inhaling normally and pursing the lips and blowing the exhale out very slowly. And just letting the filaments of the feather move slightly. And it can really give you a nice visual feedback on the smoothness and flow of your breaths to see the feather moving in that flow. And then we can move to nose breathing, and you can just hold the feather just a little way away from your body under the nose and trying to breathe in a way that is so subtle that the feather is not moving at all or is hardly moving. It does depend on what kind of feather you have. And this feather breathing will really help you to connect to the subtle and slow flow of breath that we're looking for. And finally, the other practice that we talked about was the ability to just stop the breath or pause the breath at the end of the exhale. And there were two aspects to this. So I invited you once a week to do your normal breathing practice, one of the practices we've just covered in this video. And then at the end of an exhale, to just allow yourself to go into a pause, to press start on your phone stopwatch and just wait patiently and notice how long it takes before your body gives you a strong urge to breathe in. And I don't want you to resist that urge. So we're not trying to hold the breath out of the body. We're just waiting to see how long that pause is before we get a strong urge to breathe in. So we call this the control pause. And this is really a deeper, more specific exploration of our breath hunger. So if you have a very strong breath hunger, then the desire to breathe in may arise very quickly within the first 4 or 5 seconds. If you have a medium breath hunger, it may be 10 or 15 seconds before you feel that strong urge to breathe in. And if you have very good breath control, if your carbon dioxide receptors in the body are really well trained to tolerate rising levels of CO2 without giving you a strong urge to breathe in, then you may be getting to 25 seconds or beyond. But we're not setting ourselves any targets here. We're just noticing it. About once a week, we're just writing down how long our control pause is so that we can have a measure of how successful we are being at retraining our breath and our breathing mechanism to be a little bit more tolerant to breathing within metabolic needs rather than the over breathing pattern, which is so common, though not necessarily your pattern. And then finally, there was one variation on that, which some of you may find helpful, because if you're just sitting still and you allow yourself to go into a pause, it can create feelings of anxiety in people who are prone to that. So what you can do is do that same practice standing up. Just do some nice, easy, relaxed breaths. And then at the end of an exhale, pinch the nose closed and just walk up and down the room, counting the number of steps or using the stopwatch again, and see how long it is until how many steps you do until you feel that desire to breathe in, and then release the hand, breathe in normally. Check in with your breath, make sure you haven't overstrained, that you haven't gone into deep breathing or any kind of panic. And if any of that disturbance has happened and you've held the breath out for too long, so come back into easy breathing. When you're ready, after an exhale, pinch the nose, walk up and down, count how many steps, see how long it takes, and then breathe in. And that may be a practice that you would do 5 or 6 times, and that will help you to develop your control pause and to just do a little bit of work directly on re-educating the carbon dioxide receptors in your body, the chemoreceptors, to accept a little bit of rising CO2. And remember, for many of us, we're just bringing that sensitivity back up to a normal range. So people who overbreathe can be oversensitive to CO2 levels, and so they're constantly overbreathing. If we can get back to normal range, then we're more likely to be able to breathe in a way that really, really serves our purpose, that maximizes oxygen saturation, and that really helps us to reduce some of the stress that can come from overbreathing, some of the stress on the body's physiology and on the breathing mechanism. So enjoy your breathing, and I hope you found this video helpful.